When my son told me I wasn't welcome at his house for Christmas, I smiled, walked to my car, and made one phone call. By New Year's Day, their mortgage payments were gone. And that was just the start of my plan. Sometimes being kind gets you nowhere, and being tough is the only thing people understand. You won't believe what happened next. Let me tell you the real story. First, thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Your support means the world to us. If you enjoy our stories, please hit subscribe. Tell us which city you're watching from in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Today's special shout-out goes to Margaret Chen from California. Thank you for being part of our family. Now let me tell you what actually happened. I was making my special apple pie recipe, I said, getting comfortable on Tommy's new leather sofa. The one with cinnamon and nutmeg that your dad always loved. Remember how he used to say it was better than his mother's recipe? The words floated in the cozy air around us, mixing with the smell of Jennifer's fancy lavender candles. Tommy moved beside me, his wedding ring catching light from their 10-foot Christmas tree. Something in how he sat changed, like he was getting ready for something bad. "Mom, I'm sorry, but you won't be able to come for Christmas this year." The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. I blinked hard, sure I heard him wrong. "What do you mean? Why can't I come?" Tommy wouldn't look at me, staring at the glass coffee table instead. The one I helped him buy last summer when Jennifer said their old furniture looked cheap. "Jennifer's dad is coming, and he'd rather if you weren't here." My hands went icy cold. "He'd rather. It's just easier this way, Mom. You know how her dad feels about certain things. He has his own ideas about family dinners." His voice got quieter with each word, like he was shrinking into himself. I looked around the living room at the silk curtains I paid for when Jennifer complained about the neighbors looking in. At the wooden floors that came from my second loan. At the fancy light fixtures that emptied my savings account. Every part of this house had my fingerprints on it, my hard work, my love for my son. "His own ideas," I said slowly. "And what ideas are those, Tommy?" He looked scared. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Jennifer's new coffee machine, the expensive one she had to have for her morning routine that lasted exactly 2 weeks. $3,000 of my money sitting there, probably used 3 times since November. Where will I spend Christmas then? The question came out softer than I wanted. Tommy's face looked broken. "Maybe you could visit Aunt Linda, or we could meet up the weekend after." The weekend after. Like Christmas was just another meeting that could be moved around for other people's comfort. I stood up, my back aching after 9 years of carrying this weight by myself. "Understand," I said. Wait." But I was already walking toward the door, past the family pictures where my face got smaller in each frame, past the closet full of Jennifer's 100 coats. My hand found the doorknob, cold and solid in my palm. "Son," I said without turning around. "Tell Jennifer's dad I said Merry Christmas." The cold December air hit my face as I walked to my car. Behind me I heard Tommy call my name once, then the soft sound of the door closing. Final. Complete. I sat in my driver's seat for a moment, engine off, looking at the Christmas lights in windows of houses where I'd never be welcome. My phone buzzed. Probably Tommy wanting to make things better with empty words and guilt. I didn't look. Instead, I started the car and drove into the darkness, leaving behind the warm glow of the house I bought but would never belong in. The heater hummed against the December cold as I drove through familiar streets toward home. Riverside sprawled around me, every street corner holding memories of who I used to be. The woman who believed family came first, who'd give her last penny to see her son happy. That woman was foolish. I stopped at the red light on Oak and Main, watching a young mom loading Christmas gifts into her car. Her kids pressed their faces against the window, excited about tomorrow. Once upon a time that had been Tommy and me. Before Jennifer, before I became nothing more than a walking bank with annoying feelings. The numbers started spinning through my head like a broken calculator. $3,000 every month for 6 years. My phone had given up trying to make sense of it last fall when I finally added everything up. $170,000. More money than Robert and I had saved for our whole retirement. Just gone. I pressed the gas pedal harder than I needed to as the light turned green. The car responded with a sound that matched my anger. Cedar Street. That's where I took out my first loan. Our house, Robert's and mine, to cover their down payment. The bank lady had looked at me with pity I didn't understand then. Mrs. Patterson, are you sure about this? You're putting a lot at risk for someone else's house. Someone else's house. Not my son's future, not my family's security. Someone else's house. Maple Street, the credit union where I got a second loan when Tommy lost his job 3 years ago. Just for now, Mom. Just until I find something new. Jennifer had stood behind him, $800 purse on her shoulder, nodding sadly while secretly calculating how much my worry was worth. Nothing. As it turned out, my worry was worth nothing to them. I pulled into my driveway, the one with cracks in the concrete I couldn't afford to fix because every extra dollar went to their perfect suburban dream. The porch light flickered, another repair I'd been putting off. Inside, the house felt empty without Robert's jokes, without the warmth of family dinners that would never happen again. My phone rang as I struggled with my keys, the loud sound echoing off the quiet walls. Jennifer's name appeared on the screen, probably wanting to explain why I wasn't good enough for her dad's fancy standards. Perfect timing. I'd been waiting 6 years to have this talk. I answered on the 5th ring, letting her wait just long enough to wonder if I'd answer at all. Helen. Jennifer's voice was sweet like fake sugar, the same tone she used when asking me to pay their electric bill or car payment. I heard about the little problem with Tommy. Problem. I leaned against my kitchen counter, still wearing my jacket. I don't think there's any problem, Jennifer. You made your feelings quite clear. Look, I know this seems mean, but you have to understand my dad's side of things. He's very particular about people. They expect a certain kind of atmosphere during holidays. A certain kind of atmosphere, I repeated. And what kind is that? Oz. I could hear shopping bags rustling in the background. Probably spending money that should have gone to their house payment. Money that was my job to provide, apparently. Well, he's not used to your kind of food. All that heavy comfort food and loud talking. And honestly, Helen, he's an educated man. He expects conversations about books, politics, culture, you know. The words hurt worse than a slap. 9 years of keeping quiet, of swallowing insults for Tommy's sake, of pretending not to notice how she looked at me like I was some kind of servant. My kind of food. My voice stayed calm, controlled. You mean the food you ate every Sunday for 4 years when money was tight? The casseroles you said reminded you of your grandmother? That was different. We were grateful then, but now with my dad. Now with your dad, you can't have the working-class woman embarrassing you at your fancy dinner table. The fake sweetness disappeared. Don't be dramatic, Helen. This isn't about class. It's about fitting in. My father went to Harvard. My mother has a master's degree. They vacation in Europe. What exactly would you talk about at dinner? Stories about cleaning houses. Heat filled my chest, but I kept my voice steady. I built a business from nothing after your father-in-law died. I've had over 30 employees. I've paid more in taxes than your father made in his best year. Money isn't everything, Helen. Breeding matters. Education matters. And honestly, Robert understood his place better than you understand yours. The line went completely quiet. She'd crossed it. The line I didn't even know was there until she'd stomped across it in her designer shoes. What did you say about my husband? I'm just saying he knew how to stay quiet. He didn't make waves. He understood that some places weren't meant for people like him. My hand squeezed the phone until my knuckles turned white. Robert had more class in his little finger than your entire family will ever have. Oh please. He was a janitor who got lucky. At least he had the sense to keep his mouth shut about it. Jennifer. My voice dropped to something I didn't recognize. I want you to listen very carefully. This conversation is over. We're done pretending to be family. You can't just we're done, I repeated and hung up. I set the phone down carefully on the counter, my hands surprisingly steady. Around me, the kitchen felt different, smaller, but somehow cleaner, like a heavy weight had been lifted from the air itself. I walked to my desk in the corner, pulled out the thick folder I'd been avoiding for months. Bank papers, loan documents, 6 years of automatic payments that had drained me dry while they lived like royalty. Time to stop the bleeding. The papers spread across my kitchen table like evidence at a trial. 6 years of bank records, each one showing the same automatic payment. $3,000 on the first of every month, disappearing from my account into theirs. A paper trail of my own stupidity. I pulled out my calculator and started adding. The first year, $36,000. The second year, another $36,000. By the third year, I'd stopped buying myself new clothes. The fourth year, I'd started shopping at discount stores. This year, the sixth year, I'd been eating soup and sandwiches for dinner to make ends meet. $174,000. Not counting the down payment. Not counting the times I'd covered their utilities when Jennifer's shopping got out of control. Not counting the new kitchen, the landscaping, the furniture that was essential for their image. I sat back in my chair looking at the numbers until they got blurry. Robert's life insurance money, my retirement savings, the college fund we'd started for grandchildren I'd apparently never be allowed to see. All of it gone. Poured into a house where I wasn't welcome for Christmas dinner. I reached for my phone, scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for my credit union. The automated system offered me choices in English and Spanish. How thoughtful. How kind to people like me. Customer service. This is David. How can I help you today? I need to stop an automatic payment, I said, my voice steadier than it had been in years. Course, ma'am. I'll need your account number and some information to verify who you are. I read off the numbers, listened to him typing in the background. Professional, efficient. No questions about why a 64-year-old woman was stopping payments to what was probably her son's house. I see the payment you're talking about, Mrs. Patterson. $3,000 monthly to First National. Account ending in 9156. How long have you been making this payment? 6 years. The words tasted bitter. And you want to stop it right away. I looked around my kitchen at the old appliances I couldn't afford to replace, at the walls that needed painting, at the windows that let in cold air because I'd spent my home improvement money on someone else's palace. Right away I confirmed. The payment has been stopped. Is there anything else I can help you with today? No, I said, surprised by how good the word felt. No, that's everything. I hung up and sat in the sudden quiet of my house. Outside, December darkness was settling over the city. Christmas lights twinkling in windows where families gathered without conditions, without judgment, without needing to hide who they were. For the first time in 6 years, next month's budget would work. For the first time since Robert died, I could afford to fix my heater, buy good food, maybe even take a trip. I gathered up the bank records, the loan papers, all the proof of my generosity. Then I walked to my fireplace, lit a match, and watched 6 years of sacrifice turn to ash. The fire felt warm on my face, warmer than I'd felt in years. My phone buzzed with a text message, probably Tommy wanting to apologize, or Jennifer needing money for something important, like new decorations. I didn't check it. Instead, I poured myself a glass of the good wine, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to come. Tonight felt special enough. I raised my glass to the empty room, to Robert's photo on the shelf, to the woman I used to be and the woman I was becoming. Merry Christmas to me, I said, and meant it. The next morning came bright and clear, December sunlight streaming through my kitchen windows as I drank my second cup of coffee. For the first time in years, I wasn't worried about how much money would disappear from my account in 2 days. The freedom tasted better than the expensive blend I'd finally let myself buy. My phone rang at exactly 11:15. Jennifer's name flashed on the screen like a warning sign. Helen. Her voice carried that familiar tone of barely hidden annoyance. I need you to pick up my dad from the airport. His flight from Boston gets in at 3. I set down my mug carefully, watching the steam rise toward the ceiling. Jennifer, did you forget about our conversation yesterday? Look, whatever that was about, we need to focus on real things now. My dad needs a ride, and you're the only one free during the day. The nerve was breathtaking. Less than 24 hours after telling me I wasn't good enough to share Christmas dinner with her family, She expected me to work as their personal driver. And you're asking me because that's what family does, Helen. They help each other. Her voice got sharper with irritation. Besides, let's be honest here. You're not exactly busy. You're too old to have real responsibilities. So just get in your car and pick him up. There it was, the final insult wrapped in a demand. What airline? I asked quietly. American Flight 283. He'll be at baggage claim area B. And Helen, he's expecting someone who can handle his luggage properly. Don't embarrass us. I could hear her nails tapping against something hard. Probably her granite countertop, the one I'd paid for when she decided regular counters weren't good enough for her cooking shows. Course, I said. I'll take care of everything. And wear something nice. Maybe that blue dress you wore to Tommy's graduation. He notices things like that. The line went dead. She hadn't even said thank you. I sat back in my chair, looking at my phone's dark screen. 3 o'clock, Flight 283, baggage claim area B. I glanced at the wall clock above my stove. 11:58. Plenty of time. I poured myself another cup of coffee, added an extra spoonful of sugar, and opened yesterday's newspaper to the crossword puzzle I hadn't finished. 12 across. Sweet revenge. 10 letters. The answer would come to me eventually. At 3:20, I was settling into my favorite chair with a fresh cup of tea and the Sunday paper. The crossword from yesterday lay completed on my coffee table. Sweet revenge had been retribution. My phone buzzed against the wooden surface. Jennifer's name again. I let it ring. The December sun slanted through my living room windows, warming the space where I'd spent so many lonely evenings counting the cost of my kindness. Today the silence felt different. Earned. Intentional. 3:55. The phone buzzed again. This time I could see the preview of her text. Mom, where are you? My dad is. I turned the phone face down and went back to the sports section. The Seahawks had won again. Some things do change. By 4:30 my phone had buzzed 8 times. I'd finished the newspaper, made a second pot of tea, and started organizing the messy drawer in my kitchen table. Amazing what you could get done when you weren't rushing around serving people who thought you were their personal helper. The 9th call came at 4:50. Instead of Jennifer's name, I saw an unknown number. Probably her dad borrowing someone's phone at the airport. I let that one ring too. Outside, a neighbor was putting up Christmas lights on his fence. His children running around the yard with the wild energy that only December afternoons could bring. Normal families doing normal things. No one was stuck anywhere, waiting for someone who would never show up. 5:20. My phone started ringing and didn't stop. Jennifer, then the unknown number, then Jennifer again. The buzzing became constant, like an angry bee trapped against glass. I walked to my kitchen and unplugged my house phone from the wall. Then I turned my cell phone completely off. Perfect quiet. I made myself a grilled ham and cheese sandwich and heated up a can of chicken soup. Comfort food I hadn't let myself have in months because every grocery dollar had gone toward making ends meet while paying for their lifestyle. The cheese melted perfectly golden. The soup steamed in my favorite bowl. Outside, the winter sun was already starting to set, casting long shadows across my backyard. Somewhere across town, 2 people were probably standing in an airport parking lot, arguing about taxi prices and wondering how their personal servant had the nerve to leave them stranded. The thought made my soup taste even better. By 6 o'clock I'd eaten dinner, loaded my dishwasher, and was thinking about what movie to watch. It had been years since I'd had an entire evening to myself without worrying about emergency calls for money or last-minute favors. I was reaching for the remote when someone started banging on my front door. Not knocking. Banging. The kind of angry pounding that shook the frame and announced pure rage. I set down my tea and walked slowly toward the sound, already knowing exactly who I'd find on the other side. The banging got louder as I got closer, each hit more violent than the last. Through the peephole, I could see 3 figures crowded on my small porch like wolves surrounding prey. I opened the door to find Richard Morrison's red face inches from mine. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted, pushing past me into my living room without invitation. We waited at that airport for over 4 hours. Linda followed him, her usually perfect hair messy, her lips pressed into a thin line of pure hatred. This is completely unacceptable behavior from someone your age, Helen. Absolutely shameful. Jennifer came last, her designer coat wrinkled, her makeup smeared. You humiliated us. Do you have any idea what you've done? My dad had to take a $60 taxi because you decided to throw a tantrum. Get out of my house. My voice cut through their chorus of anger like a knife through butter. They stopped mid-rant, shocked by the steel in my tone. Excuse me. Richard's face went from red to purple. You don't get to make demands here, lady. Not after what you pulled today. This is my house, I said quietly, not moving from my position by the door. And I want you out now. Linda stepped forward, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension she'd perfected over decades of looking down on people like me. Helen, you clearly don't understand how serious your mistake is. My husband has connections throughout this city. Business connections, social connections. You can't treat people like us this way and expect this was a lesson for you, I interrupted, meeting her gaze steadily. A lesson about your excessive pride and your terrible treatment of people you think are beneath you. Jennifer's mouth fell open. A lesson? Who do you think you are to teach anyone anything? You're nobody. I'm someone who finally stopped being your personal bank account and taxi service. I stepped aside and held the door open wider. The lesson is over. You can leave. Richard pointed a finger toward my chest but didn't quite dare touch me. You have no idea who you're messing with, old woman. I've been in this city longer than you've been breathing its air. I know people. Important people. People who can make your life very, very difficult. Is that a threat, Mr. Morrison? So promise. His voice dropped to a scary whisper. You think abandoning elderly people at an airport is just something you can do without consequences? You're about to learn exactly how wrong you are. Linda nodded, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. Indeed, actions have consequences, Helen, and yours will be quite public. Jennifer grabbed her dad's arm. Daddy, let's just go. This pathetic old woman isn't worth our time. They filed out of my house like a defeated army, but Richard turned back at the doorway. You'll regret this, he said. Guarantee it. I closed the door behind them and turned the lock with a satisfying click. Through the window, I watched them pile into their rental car, still arguing among themselves as they drove away into the December darkness. The house felt cleaner with them gone, as if their presence had left a stain that was only now lifting. But their parting words echoed in the sudden quiet. Public consequences, important people, connections. I walked back to my living room and picked up my tea, still warm in its cup. For the first time in this whole mess, I felt something that might have been worry. But it was overwhelmed by something much stronger. Excitement. 4 days later, I was enjoying my morning coffee and reading the local paper when I saw my own face staring back at me from page 2. The headline read, Local woman abandons elderly man at airport during holiday blizzard. My hands went still around the coffee mug. There I was in black and white, an old photo from my cleaning company's website, probably 7 years out of date. Below it, a story that made my blood run cold and my temper flare in equal measure. Richard and Linda Morrison, visiting their daughter for Christmas, were left stranded at the airport for over 5 hours Sunday when family member Helen Patterson failed to appear for a scheduled pickup. The couple, both in their early 60s, waited in freezing temperatures as a winter storm warning was issued for the region. Winter storm warning. It had been 55 degrees and sunny. We couldn't believe someone would just abandon us like that, said Richard Morrison, a retired bank president. We called repeatedly, but Mrs. Patterson never answered her phone. We were forced to take an expensive taxi in dangerous weather conditions. At our age, this kind of treatment is not just rude, it's dangerous. The article continued with quotes about my pattern of strange behavior and concerns about my mental state. Richard had painted himself and Linda as helpless victims of a cruel old woman who'd suddenly snapped without reason. No mention of the Christmas dinner rejection. No context about Jennifer's demands or their years of financial abuse. Just me, the villain who abandoned poor elderly tourists during a blizzard that existed only in Richard's imagination. I set down my coffee and read the article again slowly, then a third time. The byline belonged to Susan Rodriguez, community editor. I didn't recognize the name, but I recognized the strategy. Richard had called in favors, used his banking connections to get this story placed exactly where it would do maximum damage to my reputation. Smart. Very smart. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt a grudging respect for my opponents. They weren't just entitled rich kids throwing fits. They were strategic, calculating. They understood that in a small city like ours, reputation was everything. One well-placed newspaper article could destroy decades of hard work. They declared total war. I folded the newspaper carefully and set it aside, my mind already shifting into the careful planning mode that had built my business from nothing. This wasn't about airport pickups anymore. This wasn't about Christmas dinner or house payments. This was about winning. I pulled out my laptop and began typing names into search engines. Richard Morrison, Linda Morrison, Jennifer Patterson, their social media profiles, their connections, their habits, their weaknesses, everything they'd foolishly made public over the years. If they wanted to play chess, I'd show them what a real strategist looked like. I glanced at my wall calendar. December 20th. 5 days until Christmas. 5 days to plan something they'd never forget. I spent the next 4 days living in a different world. Not the world where I was Helen Patterson, the broken-down old woman who let her family walk all over her. This was the world where I was Helen Patterson, businesswoman, strategic thinker, someone who'd built something from nothing and wasn't about to let a bunch of entitled parasites destroy what I'd worked 45 years to build. My laptop became command central. Social media profiles filled my browser tabs like playing cards in a high-stakes game. Richard Morrison, retired First Community Bank president, member of the Riverside Country Club, board member of the Downtown Business Association, a man who'd spent his career in positions of trust and influence. A man with a lot to lose. Linda's Facebook painted a perfect picture of refined living. Charity events, book clubs, vacation photos from Martha's Vineyard tagged with #BlessedLife. Every post carefully designed to project success and sophistication. Comments from friends praising her elegant taste and inspiring lifestyle. All built on other people's money, including mine. Jennifer's Instagram timeline told the real story. Posts about our beautiful home with photos of the kitchen I'd paid for. Check-ins at expensive restaurants during the months when I'd covered their car payments. Status update from last week. So excited for Christmas dinner with family. Can't wait to show off our hosting skills. Our hosting skills, our home, our success. The selfishness was breathtaking. But it was Tommy's Facebook profile that gave me the final piece I needed. His recent activity showed a new friend. Susan Rodriguez, community editor at the Herald Tribune. The same Susan Rodriguez who'd written the hit piece about me. I leaned back in my desk chair, looking at the evidence spread across my screen. These people had made 4 critical mistakes. First, they'd underestimated me completely. Second, they'd gone public with their attack, which meant I could go public with my response. Third, they'd documented their entire privileged lifestyle online, creating a perfect catalog of hypocrisy. Fourth, they'd left a digital trail connecting them to the newspaper story. I clicked through to Susan Rodriguez's profile. 38 years old, journalism degree from State, 12 years at local papers, no previous connection to banking or finance, which meant Richard had reached out cold, probably through someone he knew from his business network. A quick search through local business directories confirmed my suspicion. 4 mutual connections between Richard and Susan's editor. The story hadn't just appeared. It had been planted carefully and deliberately. Amateur hour. I opened a new document and began typing. Not a response to their media attack. Something much better. Timeline. 6 years of financial support documented with bank statements, receipts, and canceled checks. The down payment for their house, $52,000 from my home equity loan. The kitchen renovation when Jennifer decided marble countertops were essential. $23,000 from my credit cards. 72 monthly house payments of $3,000 each. $174,000 not counting. Over $300,000. More than I'd spent on myself in the last 15 years. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Probably Jennifer trying a new approach. I ignored it and kept working. By evening, I had everything organized in a file folder thick enough to stop a truck. Bank statements, receipts, photos downloaded from their social media showing off purchases I'd funded, a printed copy of the newspaper article with my handwritten notes in the margins documenting each lie and distortion. I looked at my wall calendar. December 24th was circled in red. Not because it was Christmas, but because it was the perfect day for justice. According to Jennifer's Facebook events, they were hosting Christmas dinner for 15 people. Family, friends, neighbors, members of their social circle. The kind of people who read the Herald Tribune and formed opinions based on what they saw there. The kind of people who deserved to know the truth. I closed my laptop and walked to my kitchen where I'd left my good camera, the one I'd bought years ago to document work sites for my business. Time to put it to work documenting something else entirely. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. Tomorrow, Richard Morrison and his family were going to learn what happened when you declared war on someone who actually knew how to fight. Christmas Eve morning dawned gray and cold, the kind of winter day that made you grateful for warm houses and family gatherings. Too bad I wouldn't be welcome at either. But I had other plans. I laid out my evidence like a lawyer preparing for trial. Bank statements organized by year. Each monthly payment highlighted in yellow. Receipts arranged by date showing the pattern of my support for their lifestyle. Photos printed from their social media. Jennifer's new jewelry. Their vacation photos. The expensive Christmas decorations currently decorating the house I'd helped them keep. All of it copied 15 times. One for each dinner guest. The newspaper article went on top of each stack, my red pen notes visible in the margins. Lie written next to Richard's quotes about dangerous weather. False beside the claim about my strange behavior. Missing context highlighted where they'd failed to mention 6 years of financial support. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the black one I'd worn to Robert's funeral, pressed and ready for another kind of goodbye. Today I was saying farewell to the woman who'd been a doormat for her family. Tonight I'd be someone who demanded respect. At 7:15, I loaded my briefcase with the evidence packets and drove to Willowbrook. Their house glowed with warm light. Cars filling the driveway and lining the street. Through the front windows, I could see figures moving around the dining room. Jennifer playing hostess in the home my money had helped them buy. I parked across the street and checked my watch. 7:30. Perfect timing. Late enough that everyone would be seated for dinner. Early enough that they'd still be on appetizers. No easy escape for anyone. The front door was unlocked. Course it was. Jennifer loved to brag about how safe their neighborhood was, how they didn't need to worry about security like people in rougher areas. I let myself in quietly, the warm air hitting my face along with the sounds of laughter and conversation from the dining room. But darling, that's not how we do things in our family, someone was saying, followed by more laughter. Family. After everything they'd done to exclude me from it. I walked into the dining room carrying my briefcase. 15 faces turning toward me with expressions ranging from surprise to horror. Jennifer froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips. Tommy's face went white. Richard and Linda looked like they'd seen a ghost. "Good evening, everyone," I said calmly, setting my briefcase on their marble side table. "I hope you don't mind me joining your Christmas celebration." Jennifer found her voice first. "Helen, this is completely inappropriate. You need to leave immediately." "Actually," I said, opening my briefcase and pulling out the first stack of papers, "I think your guests deserve to know who really paid for this dinner, this house, and this lifestyle you've been showing off." A woman I didn't recognize, probably one of Linda's charity friends, leaned forward with curiosity. "What is she talking about, Jennifer?" "She's having some kind of breakdown," Jennifer said quickly. "Tommy, call someone." But I was already moving around the table, placing a packet of documents in front of each guest. "Here are the bank records," I said conversationally. 6 years of financial support. $174,000 in house payments alone, plus the down payment, renovations, furniture, appliances. Everything you see around you. The room went silent except for the rustling of papers as 15 people began examining the evidence. I watched their faces change as they absorbed the numbers, the dates, the undeniable proof of my generosity and their deception. This is, one man started, then stopped, staring at a bank statement. Outrageous, finished the woman across from him. Jennifer, why didn't you tell us any of this? Jennifer's perfect composure was cracking. It's more complicated than it looks. Helen volunteered to help us. We never asked. Actually, I interrupted, pulling out the newspaper article. Let's talk about what you did ask for and what you told the media about me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I placed copies of the newspaper article on the table, watching as the dinner guests recognized my photo from the unflattering story that had run 5 days earlier. Now, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. Let's talk about the real manipulators in this family. Richard's face had gone from red to gray. Linda sat rigid in her chair, her wine glass forgotten in her hand. Mr. Morrison here used his banking connections to plant this story. I continued, tapping the newspaper. Notice how I'm portrayed as unstable and dangerous, abandoning poor elderly people in freezing weather. A gray-haired man in an expensive sweater looked up from the article. Richard, what is this about? The weather was 55 degrees and sunny, I said before Richard could answer. And they weren't stranded tourists. They were Jennifer's parents coming to the Christmas dinner I'd been banned from attending because I wasn't good enough for their company. Linda finally found her voice. That's not, we never said. You never said what, Linda? I pulled out my phone where I'd screenshot several of Jennifer's social media posts. That I was too working class for your dad. That my home cooking and blue-collar conversation would embarrass you in front of your educated friends. The woman I'd identified as one of Linda's charity friends shifted uncomfortably. Linda, surely you didn't. He's twisting everything, Richard blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. This woman has serious mental health issues. The stress of aging, financial problems. Financial problems. I almost laughed. Mr. Morrison, I've been supporting your daughter and son-in-law to the tune of nearly $4,000 a month for 6 years. The only financial problems here are the ones you're about to have. I turned to address the entire table. These people have taken over $300,000 from me while calling me names behind my back. They've manipulated my son against me, banned me from family gatherings, and when I finally stood up for myself, they tried to destroy my reputation in the newspaper. Tommy spoke for the first time. His voice barely above a whisper. Mom, I didn't know about the newspaper. Your wife knew, I said quietly. And her parents orchestrated it. They turned me into a villain for refusing to be their personal ATM and chauffeur. The social dynamic in the room was shifting like tectonic plates. I could see it in the guests' faces. The gradual realization that everything they'd been told about tonight's generous hosts was built on lies. This is unconscionable, said an elderly woman in pearls, staring at the bank statements. Richard, how could you let your daughter take advantage of this woman's generosity, then attack her publicly when she stopped enabling it? Richard's carefully maintained facade was crumbling. You don't understand the full situation. I understand perfectly, the woman interrupted. This woman has been supporting your family financially while you treated her like hired help, and when she finally said no, you tried to ruin her reputation. Linda's voice came out strangled. She abandoned us at the airport. After you told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas dinner because my presence would be inappropriate for your dad, I said calmly. After 6 years of paying their bills while you looked down on me for my background and education level. The silence was deafening. 15 people staring at Richard and Linda with expressions ranging from disgust to embarrassment for having associated with them. Jennifer made one last desperate attempt to control the narrative. Everyone, please. This is a family matter that's gotten out of hand. No, I said firmly. This stopped being a family matter when you made it public. When you used the newspaper to attack my character. When you decided my reputation was acceptable collateral damage for your pride. I looked around the table at faces I didn't recognize, but who now knew exactly who I was. I wanted you all to know the truth before you read about Helen Patterson in the paper again. Because you will read about me again, but next time it'll be the real story. I closed my briefcase and straightened my jacket. Enjoy the rest of your dinner. It's the last one I'll be paying for. As I walked toward the door, I could hear the eruption beginning behind me. Voices raised in accusation, questions demanding answers, the sound of a carefully constructed social facade falling apart. It was the most beautiful Christmas music I'd ever heard. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning in April, delivered by certified mail, with the weight of legal consequences behind every word. I signed for it at my front door, noting how the spring air smelled of new growth and possibility instead of the winter desperation that had marked those dark December days. Notice of default, the envelope read. Final demand for payment. Inside, 4 months of missed house payments had caught up with Tommy and Jennifer like a tsunami of reality. $12,000 in arrears. 14 days to bring the account current or face foreclosure proceedings on the house I'd helped them buy. I set the letter aside and returned to my coffee, reading it the way you'd read news about distant weather. Interesting, but not your problem anymore. My phone had been ringing for weeks with increasingly desperate calls. Jennifer's number blocked after the first hysterical voicemail. Richard and Linda, whose social standing in the city had evaporated like morning mist after their Christmas dinner humiliation. Even Tommy, whose calls I'd been ignoring out of a mixture of anger and curiosity about how long it would take him to swallow his pride. The answer, apparently, was 112 days. He knocked on my door that Saturday evening, no longer the confident man who'd excluded me from Christmas dinner, but someone who looked like he'd aged a decade in 4 months. Dark circles under his eyes, his expensive suit wrinkled, the smell of desperation clinging to him like cheap cologne. "Mom," he said when I opened the door. "We need to talk." I stepped aside to let him in, noting how he looked around my house like he was seeing it for the first time. The new furniture I'd bought with my first mortgage-free paycheck, the fresh paint on walls that hadn't been updated in 10 years because every spare dollar had gone to his lifestyle. The repairs I'd finally been able to afford now that I wasn't subsidizing someone else's American dream. "Nice place," he said quietly. "It's what happens when you spend money on yourself instead of people who don't appreciate it," I replied, settling into my new recliner. "Coffee?" He shook his head, perching on the edge of my couch like he was afraid to get comfortable. "Mom, I need you to know how sorry I am about everything. Christmas dinner, the newspaper article, the way Jennifer, the way we treated you." "Go on." "I didn't know about Richard planting that story. I swear I didn't. When I found out," he ran his hands through his hair. "God, Mom, the things they said about you behind your back, the way they talked about our family, about Dad's memory." My jaw tightened at the mention of Robert, but I kept my voice level. "And what exactly did they say about your father? That he knew his place better than you knew yours? That he understood boundaries? He couldn't meet my eyes. I should have defended you. I should have stood up to them years ago." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of 6 years of mistakes filling the space between us. Outside, I could hear my neighbor working in his garden. The normal sounds of a normal Saturday evening in a normal neighborhood where sons didn't exclude their mothers from Christmas dinner. "The house is in foreclosure," Tommy said finally. "No. We can't make the payments without." He stopped, seeming to realize how that sounded. "Without my help," I finished. "Without the money I was sending every month while you let your wife's family treat me like garbage." "I know how it looks," Tommy said. I leaned forward, making sure he was looking at me. "Do you know how much money I sent you over 6 years?" He nodded miserably. "Jennifer calculated it after Christmas. The house payments, the down payment, everything else. Over $300,000. $326,412, I corrected. "I know the exact amount because I finally did something I should have done years ago. Added it up." His face crumpled. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it, son. That money is gone. But more importantly, those years are gone. 6 years when I could have been building a relationship with you instead of funding your wife's fantasy life. No. I know that now. He looked up at me with something that might have been hope. But maybe we could start over. Maybe there's a way to. Are you asking me to resume the house payments? The hope died in his eyes. We're going to lose everything, Mom. The house, Jennifer's respect for me, her dad's approval. I don't know what I'll do. You'll figure it out, I said, not unkindly. The same way I figured out how to live without a son who respected me. The same way I learned to spend Christmas alone while you celebrated with people who thought I was beneath them. He started to cry then, quietly, like a man who'd run out of other options. I lost you, didn't I? I chose them over you, and now I've lost you forever. I watched him for a long moment. This man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, who'd let his wife's family convince him that his mother wasn't good enough for their company. Tommy, I said finally, you didn't lose me. You gave me away. There's a difference. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Is there any chance, any way you could forgive me? I forgave you months ago, I said, and meant it. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back to the way things were. It doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen, or that I'm going to resume paying for a lifestyle that came with the condition that I be grateful for scraps of your attention. Then what does it mean? I stood up and walked to my mantel where Robert's photo sat next to a new picture. Me with Linda and her family at Easter dinner. The first holiday I'd spent with people who actually wanted me there. It means that if you want a relationship with me, you'll have to build it from scratch. It means showing me respect instead of demanding I earn it. It means making choices based on what's right, not what's convenient. I turned back to him. And it means that the next time someone, your wife, her parents, anyone, tries to exclude me from family gatherings, you'll remember who actually acts like family. He nodded slowly, understanding perhaps for the first time that respect wasn't something you could take for granted. The house, he asked quietly. Isn't my problem anymore, I said. You're a grown man, Tommy. Figure it out like grown men do. Get a job that pays enough to cover your bills. Sell the house and buy something you can afford. Stop living beyond your means and expecting other people to subsidize your choices. He stood up slowly, his shoulders straight for the first time since he'd arrived. You're right about all of it. No. He walked to the door, then turned back. Mom, for what it's worth, seeing you stand up for yourself at Christmas dinner. I was proud of you. Embarrassed and angry, but proud too. Good, I said. Maybe there's hope for you yet. After he left, I poured myself a glass of the good wine and stepped onto my back porch. Spring was coming to the city, the trees beginning to bud, the air warming with promise. In 5 months I'd be 65. Robert had been gone for 10 years. I'd wasted 6 of those years being a doormat for people who didn't appreciate sacrifice. I wasn't planning to waste anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Dinner Sunday. The kids want to show you their art projects. I smiled and typed back. Wouldn't miss it. Real family, it turned out, was something you found with people who actually wanted you there. Everything else was just expensive theater, and I was done buying tickets to shows where I wasn't welcome on stage. The wine tasted like freedom, and the future looked exactly as bright as I was willing to make it. If you enjoyed this story from Granny's voice, please like this video. Subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts about this story in the comments below. To listen to our next story, click on the video on the left.